This is Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
Hello and welcome to Into the Multiverse. Boy, have we got a fascinating, exciting show for you today. We're going to be talking to Andrew Klavan, best-selling author, host of The Andrew Klavan Show on the Daily Wire. But first, if you haven't had a chance to do so, it is really important to subscribe. Make sure you click the little bell and tell YouTube that you always want to be notified. And hey, let me know if you're not notified, because I've been getting some emails from people saying that they click the bell, they do everything they're supposed to, and YouTube still isn't notifying them. So I'd be interested to know if that's the case. Let me know if it is. But in case you don't get notified, every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, you will get a new episode of Into the Multiverse right here. We're also on Roku and Apple TV and a whole bunch of stuff. For more information about everywhere you can find Multiverse, head on over to skywatchtv.com. All right, Andrew Klavan is a best-selling author. He wrote The Great Good Thing, and as well as a lot of others. His books have been made into movies, which is really, really fascinating. So best-selling author, political commentator. He hosts the Andrew Klavan Show over at the Daily Wire, and you should check it out because it's a fantastic show. I had the honor of speaking to Mr. Klavan. So all that being said, and without further ado, check this out. Well, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome back to the show Andrew Klavan. Mr. Klavan, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been so long since we talked last.
It's true. I've missed you terribly.
Oh, same here. Yeah, the audience might not realize this because this is probably a couple weeks since the last time. But on Into the Multiverse, when we record these interviews, we usually do 2 or 3 at a time. So for us, it's only a couple seconds. But for the audience, it's a couple of weeks or longer. So talk about time dilation.
I'm glad you said that so people understand I do change my shirt from time to time.
Yeah, every once in a while, I like to remind people that I do as well. So last time that we talked, we got a little bit into politics, and I wanted to talk about that, not because this is necessarily a political show, even though we do deal with politics, but because it's important to understand the culture that we're living in, especially we as Christians. You had a show one time, and I think it was an answer for one of your the mailbag, and somebody had asked if you thought there could be another great Christian revival. And you gave a really interesting answer. You said, yes, that you believe that that's coming, but it would have to come from the intellectuals. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that we don't always realize this, but there's, just like there's a trickle-down economy, the rich people's money becomes our jobs. There's also trickle-down intellectual atmosphere. I mean, a lot of the ideas that we think we just believe in come from the academy, they come from Hollywood, they come from writers, and they filter down into people's normal ideas. And people are falling away from faith without really thinking it through. I think that people fall away from faith because it seems like none of the smart set believes, none of the intellectual people believe. And I think that in order for people to start to realize that that's just not true, the fact is the smarter people are frequently the ones who are going to church now, but still, the press and the academy is very atheist, very pro-atheist, and a certain group of scientists are like that. And it creates this atmosphere that says to you, if you're a smart person, if you're not a fool, you don't believe. And I think that intellectuals are going to have to embrace the fact, as they are slowly starting to do, that without religion, without God, nothing they're saying actually makes sense. If you can have a religion, I was recently reading this book by Steven Pinker, Enlightenment Now, and he's very atheist, and he says, all you have to do is be a humanist to have a moral point of view. But that doesn't answer the question of why you should be a humanist, why you shouldn't get what you can out of people. And I think that the entire worldview in which there's either morality is relative, which is the multicultural moral relative path, or the point of view that somehow there is this magical morality that becomes important even without God. Neither of those make sense. And so I do think that intellectuals, even now, especially young ones, are embracing the fact that, wait, maybe we have to rethink this. And I think that is going to have a tremendous effect. This happened once in history before, after the French Revolution, when atheism was very popular. There was something called the Oxford Movement that brought new thinkers into the Christian church and the Catholic church and really restarted the Victorian era of belief.
That's fantastic, and I've noticed that trend too. Because a big part of why up until recently I wasn't really interested in politics was because it was so hard to find any good conservative political thinkers that could explain it in a way, in a way that anybody can understand, but also that had any kind of root of spirituality in it. But now that's exploding. I mean, your show, everybody at the Daily Wire, other shows like Louder with Crowder, and there's a lot of others that it's really exploding. And what I love is that you're not shy at all about talking about your faith on the Andrew Klavan Show on the Daily Wire. And that, to me, was what really drew my interest. But there's a lot of people that think, political thinking and religious thinking should be completely separate. Do you think there's a place for politics in Christianity? And on the other side, do you think there's a place for Christianity in politics?
Well, actually, I think of Christianity as a bigger tent than politics. I mean, I really do believe that I want to be sitting in a church next to a guy who disagrees with me. That's not a problem for me.
Yes.
And one of my objections, I have objections when the man stands up in the pulpit and believes that his personal political viewpoint is somehow the voice of Christ. I mean, I can just guarantee you it's not true. My son, who is a very brilliant classic scholar, Spencer, and he sometimes gives lay sermons in his church, recently gave a sermon in which he talked about the fact that Christ called both Levi, the tax collector, who is a collaborator with Rome, and Simon the Zealot, who was a revolutionary against Rome. And he didn't say to them, you guys have got to agree. He just said, go forth and build me a boat so I can go and spread my message. I really do believe that the love of God embraces us all. I don't know why it embraces liberals. I don't know what God is thinking, but I trust that he does. And I think that when we both say we're coming from a place of godliness and a place of faith, that it's much more likely that we'll be able to speak to one another and maybe find some common ground, or maybe at least live with the fact that God has made both of us to see things from a different point of view.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we try to do that on this show too, because there's a lot of time, especially in the realm of quantum physics, oh my gosh, it's the interpretations of certain scientific facts. I mean, the interpretations of the facts is what's subjective, and that's what people get hung up on. You can have two scientists look at the same experiment and they see the same thing, but they interpret it differently. And we almost see that. Well, not almost. We actually do see that a lot in Christianity as well. You can have two Christians look at the same Bible verse and interpret it totally differently.
Yep.
I love the idea of having like open dialogues like that. Now, you're a best-selling author. You're a fiction writer, actually, and so you're well versed in different literary genres and everything. One of the things that really opened my eyes to how beautiful the Bible is when I learned to not take the entire thing 100% literal. And that doesn't mean that it's not 100% true. It is 100% true. But there's different literary genres. And I've heard you talk about that too. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's so important. I mean, we all know this, that if I sit down and I say to you, once upon a time there was a man who lived in the woods, you know that I'm telling a certain kind of story. If instead I come in and I say, as I was walking here, there was a burning building and I rushed in and saved 2 children, that's a different kind of story. And the kinds of truth that they are conveying are very different. And it matters, for instance, if I did in fact rush into a burning building. If I didn't, that's a terrible thing to say. But it doesn't matter whether once upon a time there lived in a man in the woods. When Jesus says, there was a man who had 2 sons, nobody says, well, where did he live? What were the sons' names? Nobody cares, because they understand he's speaking in parables. Some of the things in the Bible, I believe some of the creation story, the Eden story, are some of the most profound stories I've ever heard. Was there a talking snake in the Garden of Eden? I wasn't there. I kind of doubt it, but it doesn't matter to me, because I don't think that that's a very interesting story. What I think is interesting is what that is conveying to you about humanity and human life, and I think it's fascinating. We know the material world through science and experimentation and experience. That's how we know it. And when it conflicts, and many great Christian thinkers have said this, including some of the saints, when it conflicts, we have to understand that the Bible was being written in various genres. And that helps you get at the truth that the Bible is telling you. Because as you say, I believe every word of the Bible is true, but it packs that truth into different stories. It would have to. It would have to, because you cannot tell every truth there is by simply listing the facts. You just can't. I cannot talk about, there's some things I can't even talk about. The experience of being in love, the experience of beauty, the experience, all the important stuff, I can't talk about with facts. I can't say, oh, it was so beautiful that this part of my brain fired up. That doesn't tell you anything. I have to tell you, I have to use metaphorical language, and the Bible does this again and again. Now, look, there's things in the Bible that if they're not true, we're in trouble, like the resurrection. I think that would be a problem, but those are the things that I think where we're dealing with the miraculous, and you have to start to ask yourself whether the miraculous exists. And once you start looking around, you start to think like, oh, yeah, it really does. There are a lot of things that are explained after the fact, but before they happen, they could never have happened.
Yeah, and a lot of Christians seem almost frightened or threatened by that idea, and that's something that we try to on this show that we really try to dispel. I mean, one of our favorite scholars, theologians, is Dr. Michael Heiser. He's been on the show a whole bunch of times, and he talks about this as well. For example, back when the Bible was being written, they thought that the earth was flat, and that got into the text quite a bit. But now, today, because, and I'm not trying to, I don't care if people want to believe the earth is flat. I don't, but if people want to, that's fine. But sometimes Christians fall into that and they say, well, it's because it's what the Bible says. And they're taking it literally when the entire thing might not be meant to be, taken like that. So, that makes a lot of sense because it's not an all or none. It's not, well, it's all literal or it's all a lie. It's not that at all. None of it's a lie. All of it's true, but not all of it has to be literal. And I think when we can open ourselves up to that and open ourselves up to the reality of the culture that the books in the Bible were originally written in, when we can be just real about it, I think that's a big evangelistic tool that we can use, especially for young people, young critical thinkers. So I think that's one obstacle that we can get around by just being a little bit more open to discuss these types of ideas. What are some other, you tour campuses and you talk to a lot of young people. What are some other obstacles that you see getting in the way of young people accepting conservative politics or even the gospel?
Well, I think one thing that I see a lot of is a kind of self-certainty about theological doctrines that have accrued over time, but are not necessarily biblical. So, Jesus at the Last Supper gave some instructions to his disciples, which I believe are also instructions to us. And you notice he didn't say things like, decide who gets into heaven and send me a list and let me know. And he didn't say, decide whether there's transubstantiation and then kill anyone who disagrees with you. Those are things that he actually didn't say. What he did say was that you should love. Yeah, exactly. He said you should love one another as I have loved you with this sacrificial love. Pretty simple advice, And he also said, and this is so important, that love God and love your neighbor are the two commandments on which everything else is hung.
Yes.
So if you find yourself saying words and communicating theological doctrines that are not hung on those two principles, love God and love your neighbor, and I mean really on love, not on some version of love where you get to set somebody on fire because it'll, cure his evil soul or something like that. I mean real love, the way you love the people you love in your life. If you're not doing that, maybe you should rethink it. It may be, I used to joke that, I truly believe that God is three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But if he turns out to be five guys named Mo, I'm not going to cancel my vacation. Why? Because I have trust that God's justice is perfect, his love is perfect, his mercy is perfect, and that I'm not perfect. And so I leave all those things to him. Those ultimate decisions to him. When he said, the other wisecrack I sometimes make is if you open the gospel and the only words in it were judge not, lest ye be judged, you could deduce the crucifixion. Because when you take away people's right to judge one another, they get so angry at you. When you tell them, what, it's none of your business what this guy is doing, just love the guy and then see how that works out for you. People get furious because they really do believe that their job is to be telling other people what to do. And Jesus was not there. He was not there. When you hear people are always talking about gentle Jesus, meek and mild, I'd like them to quote me the verse where gentle Jesus was in fact meek and mild. But when he really went after people, it was almost always religious people. Yeah. It was almost, he said to them, the prostitutes are going to get into heaven before you. The tax collectors who were like the worst people at that time, that's pretty tough talk. And I think that we are the religious people of our time, and we ought to remember that, that the prostitutes are going to get to heaven before us, And I think when you start to behave like that, like this guy is coming to you, he is a creature of God, your job is to love him, and stop telling him who's going to go to heaven and who's not, and whether the bread turns into the flesh or it doesn't, just quit the doctrine and get to the love. I think that communicates Jesus a lot better than a lot of theology does, as much as I love theology.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, I've given presentations even sermons on that same exact thing. I absolutely love that. Actually, that's such a good note to end on, because I don't think we're going to top that in this interview. If people,
yeah.
If people haven't had a chance, or if they want to know where they can watch your show, find you online, where can they go?
I tell them to come to the Daily Wire, where I have a podcast Monday through Thursday, and I'm also on Twitter at Andrew Klavan, and they can find me there. And all of that leads back to where I am in general.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast. We'll have to bring you on again sometime.
Thanks a lot.
All right, I hope you have enjoyed that. A big thank you goes out to Andrew Klavan for joining us into the Multiverse. We'll be bringing him back on for future programs, because that was fantastic. And again, if you haven't had a chance to do so, make sure you subscribe, click the bell, let YouTube know that you always want to be notified when a new episode of Into the Multiverse comes out. And in case YouTube decides that you don't need to know and just doesn't tell you, doesn't bother to tell you, in case that happens, just know that every Thursday morning at 9 a.m., you will get a new episode of Into the Multiverse. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me yet again, and until next time, take care and God bless.
The Satanists wanted to install their own tribute, a pagan idol, on the Capitol grounds, right next to the Ten Commandments.
Billions around the planet are witnessing a world in the grasp of sadistic spiritual darkness. This unholy alliance has infected our governments, our religious institutions, and our societies. The world appears to be unraveling. But can the evil behind these dark supernatural forces be defeated? Is everything playing out just as the Bible predicted it will in the final days? At last, you can know the answers to mankind's most urgent questions and learn your destiny among today's events in the new, unprecedented work taking the prophecy world by storm. Gods and Thrones, Nakash, Forgotten Prophecy, and the Return of the Elohim by best-selling author, former decorated law enforcement officer, and senior pastor Carl Gallups. This changes everything. Available now wherever fine books are sold.
America is being manipulated by sinister occult forces and a Washington-based shadow government. But now, for the first time ever, expert on occultism and best-selling author Dr. Thomas Horn is joined by senior analyst from the Pentagon, Colonel Bob McGinnis, and retired police detective Carl Gallups to expose these nefarious forces. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the Saboteurs Collection. When you order the new books, Saboteurs, Gods and Thrones, and The Deeper State from Skywatch TV, you'll also receive free of charge for a limited time the exclusive oversized hardback collector editions of the classic 2-volume set, The Devils and Evil Spirits of Babylonia, and The Fallen Angels and the Heroes of Mythology. These two timeless masterpieces, finally in print again after 100 years, are the perfect gift for the scholar or Bible student in your life, and hold a retail value of over $60 all by themselves, but are included absolutely free when you purchase the limited-time Saboteurs collection. But that's not all. You'll also receive the never-before-aired DVD Off the Record, featuring exclusive interviews with Dr. Thomas Horn, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, and Detective Carl Gallups, further exposing the dark secrets of globalist elites and how to stop them in their tracks. This content is only available in this exclusive offer and will not be aired anywhere else. Finally, you'll also receive The Shadow Hand, the over 24-hour Steve Quayle and Tom Horn definitive audio series on CD. This audio collection discloses the terrifying truth behind the infamous WikiLeaks dumps, the shadow government, and so much more. This unprecedented special offer sold separately holds a retail value of over $175. Yours now for only $29.99 plus shipping and handling. The holiday gift season is coming, and you won't find this collection anywhere else. So don't delay. Order the Saboteurs collection for somebody you love now at skywatchtvstore.com or call 1-844-750-4985.